Hello, friends. About 99% of friends who watch my videos are not subscribed, and I would be very happy if you did. Also, don't forget to press the like button and leave your comments. Your interaction makes the content reach everyone and helps the channel grow. Also, let me know in the comments from which country you are watching the video. You ever hear the sound of a dead man screaming through your CB radio at 3 a.m.? I have. And I ain't talking about a prank or some messed up radio signal. I'm talking about a full-blown cry for help from a voice that shouldn't even exist. It was about 6 years back, headed east on I-80 through Nebraska. Pitch black night. Fog hanging low like a curtain across the road, and not a single other rig in sight. My headlights cut through the mist like blades, but the darkness kept swallowing up every inch I passed. I was hauling a load of refrigerated goods, tight schedule, no room for a nap, and just enough coffee to keep my eyes from closing. That's when the radio crackled. Now, normally, truckers shoot the breeze, complain about traffic, warn about smokies ahead. But this was different. It came through like a whisper at first, then it built up into a full-blown scream. "Help me! For the love of God, someone help!" Static followed, then silence. I figured maybe I was picking up chatter from another band, or maybe some kid messing around with a ham radio. But then it came again. "Help! They're in the trees, please!" I swear on my life, the voice sounded wet, like whoever it belonged to had blood in their throat. I pulled over at the next turnout, engine idling low, stepped out with my flashlight. Not a soul around, no other trucks, no cars. Just that heavy fog and the sound of my own breathing. I got back in, heart pounding, figure maybe I'm just tired. But when I looked in the side mirror, I saw someone run across the back of my trailer. Fast. Too fast. Dressed in white. I jumped out again, ran back with the light sweeping over the gravel, my boots crunching hard, but there wasn't a single footprint. Not in the dirt, not in the dewy grass, nothing. I shut the trailer doors, locked them tighter than a bank vault, and climbed back in. That's when the smell hit me. You ever smell death before? Not rot, not decay. Death. Cold, metallic, like blood mixed with dirt and rust. I looked down and my dashboard clock had reset, flashing 12 like I'd just turned the truck on. But I'd been driving for hours, and on the seat beside me was a wet handprint. Human. Small. I didn't pick up no hitchhiker. I'd been alone the whole time. I wiped it off and hit the gas, didn't stop till daylight, swearing to myself I'd imagined the whole damn thing, but 2 days later I saw a missing persons report in a truck stop diner. Picture of a guy, same voice I'd heard begging on the CB. Name was Marvin Ellis. Disappeared 5 years before. They found his rig abandoned in the exact same turnout I stopped in, still running, doors wide open, no sign of him. Just the same wet handprint on the passenger seat. I ain't the kind of guy who scares easy. Been on the road for over 20 years, seen my fair share of wrecks, ghost towns, even ran through a hailstorm that tore half the paint off my cab. But after that night with the radio and the wet handprint, I started paying attention to things I used to ignore. Little things, flickers in the mirrors, sudden cold spots in the cab, even with the heat cranking. My next haul took me through Arizona, just outside of Winslow. Long, flat stretch of desert highway, nothing but cacti and rattlers and buzzards overhead. Sun was just starting to dip, throwing them long orange shadows across the pavement. That's when I saw it. Or hell, I don't know what I saw. Something was standing in the middle of the highway. Not a person exactly. Too tall. 7, maybe 8 feet. Arms long and hanging almost down to its knees. Head was tilted sideways like it was listening. I slowed down, squinting, figuring. Maybe it was a hitchhiker or someone dressed up screwing around. But when I flashed my brights, it didn't move. Didn't flinch. Just stood there, staring. Then it took off. Straight into the desert. Not like running either. It moved like it was floating. No bounce, no rhythm, just gliding over the sand. I pulled over, heart jackhammering, and grabbed my flashlight again. I don't know why I even stepped out. Curiosity, maybe. But the second my boots hit the ground, the desert went dead silent. No wind, no bugs, not even the crunch of gravel underfoot. I turned in a slow circle, the hairs on my arms standing straight up. That's when I heard whispering. Soft, like it. Was right behind my ear. Couldn't understand the words, just the tone. Urgent, desperate. When I spun around, nothing was there, not even a breeze. I got back in the cab fast, locked up and took off. Didn't stop till Flagstaff. Didn't tell a soul. But 3 nights later, I woke up in the sleeper cab, heart racing, drenched in sweat, and there was dirt on the floor. Desert sand. And not just a little, like someone had tracked in handfuls of it. But here's the kicker. I hadn't stepped out once that day. The doors were locked. And in the mirror above the bunk, drawn in the condensation from my breath, was a word. Listen, now I know what you're thinking. Maybe I was dreaming. Maybe I'm making this up. But let me tell you something, friend. I cleaned that mirror. I scrubbed it down. Next morning, that word was there again. Fresh, like a finger had traced it. Ever since that night on I-80, I started hearing things, seeing things. The road's different when you're alone at night, when the headlights are the only thing. Cutting through the dark. You start to realize there's stuff out there that don't care if you believe in it or not. It believes in you. So I started keeping a journal, just writing things down, trying to make sense of it all. What I saw, what I heard, what I felt. You'd be surprised how much you forget when your mind tries to protect itself, like it scrubs things clean so you can keep driving, keep breathing, keep living. But I ain't forgetting this next one. No chance. I was coming out of Colorado, right past an old way station that had been shut down for years. The windows were boarded, the scale rusted over, weeds growing up through the cracks in the asphalt. I'd passed it a dozen times before, but that night, something about it looked different. The porch light was on. Now that place hadn't had electricity since the early 2000s. Every driver who runs that stretch knows it's deader than disco. But there it was, glowing yellow like someone had just stepped out for a smoke. Against my better judgment, I slowed down and pulled off. Figured maybe a homeless guy rigged up a generator. Maybe I'd call it in if someone was squatting. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out, boots crunching soft on the gravel. It was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet where your ears start ringing just to fill the space. I walked up to the porch, shining the light through the slats in the boarded-up windows, and that's when I noticed it. The light bulb in the porch lamp wasn't plugged in. It was hanging there by a wire, swaying ever so slightly. But it was on, flickering real soft like a candle. I took one step back, then heard the front door creak open. Real slow. Didn't even touch it. Just swung inward with a long, dry moan like the house itself was breathing in. I should have walked away. I knew I should have. But I stepped inside, and my foot hit something cold and soft. I shined the light down. Pile of old driver logbooks. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Some still had names and photos on the first page. Guys I knew. Guys I'd met on the road years ago. Some of them had been reported missing. I took a step back, heart thundering, and that's when I heard the whisper again. Same voice from before. You shouldn't be here. It was right next to me. I turned, fast, light beams swinging across the room, and saw a man standing in the corner. Pale. So pale he looked like wax. Face half gone, like it had been eaten away. Eyes dark hollows, bleeding black down his cheeks. I froze. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't blink. He pointed at me with one long, broken finger and said, "They see you now." That's when the light went out. Not just the porch lamp, my flashlight too. Everything went pitch black. I stumbled back, tripped on those logbooks, fell hard on the porch, scrambled to my feet, ran like hell to the truck. Engine roared to life, tires kicked up gravel, and I didn't look in the mirrors once. I drove till dawn, past way stations, and gas stations and mile markers that looked wrong, like the numbers had been scratched out and replaced. When I finally pulled into a rest area and checked my trailer, I found one of those logbooks sitting on the floor inside. Open. My name. Written in it in red ink, and under my name, the word pending. I didn't sleep for 2 days after that. Every time I shut my eyes, I'd see that pale man in the corner, see the bleeding sockets, hear that voice saying, "They see you now." And I kept asking myself, who the hell are they? I tried, throwing that logbook away, left it in a dumpster behind a Flying J, took off down the highway like it was on fire. But when I stopped 6 hours later to fuel up, it was sitting on my passenger seat. Same page open, same red ink, still said pending. That night, something else happened. I was in the middle of nowhere, driving through Kansas, just me and the wind and my high beams. I came across a stretch of road I didn't recognize, even though I'd driven that route 100 times before. No towns, no signs, no exits. The asphalt looked wrong, darker, almost wet, like oil. I figured maybe construction rerouted me or something, so I kept going. Should have known better. The further I drove, the quieter everything got. Not just outside, inside the cab too. The engine noise got muffled, like I was underwater. Then the radio flickered on all by itself, no music, just static. And underneath it, real faint, someone whispering. I turned the volume down. The whispering got louder. "Turn back," it said, over and over. "Turn back, turn back." And then the headlights caught something ahead. I slowed down. My stomach dropped. There were people standing in the road, about a dozen of them. Not moving, not speaking, just standing shoulder to shoulder across both lanes, dressed in dark clothes, faces covered in burlap sacks tied with rope. Standing like they were waiting for me. I hit the brakes hard, tires screeching, rig shaking. I laid on the horn. They didn't flinch, didn't move. I reached for my cell to call 911, but I didn't have signal, not even a bar. That's when I saw the one in the center slowly raise a hand and pointed straight at me. No rush, just slow and deliberate, like they were marking me. I threw the truck in reverse, backed up fast, but no matter how far I went, I never saw an exit or turnoff or anything. It was just that same road stretching on forever, and then the headlights flickered, and when they came back on, the people were gone. I stopped the truck, heart jacking like crazy, looking in every direction. Then came the thumps. From the roof of my cab. 1, 2. Then something scraped across the top like claws. Long, slow, metal on metal screeching. I floored it. Didn't matter where I was going. I just needed to move. Finally, after what felt like an hour, the road dumped me back onto the main highway. Just like that. Like I'd crossed over into something else and barely found my way out. I pulled over at the next rest stop and just sat there, hands shaking, trying to calm down. That's when I noticed something on my windshield. A single handprint. Same size, same shape, same wetness as the one I found weeks ago on my seat. And underneath it, written in the dust from the drive, was a fresh word scratched across the glass. Watched. That's when I knew. I wasn't just seeing things. I wasn't just hearing ghosts or hallucinating from too much caffeine. Something out there was following me, and it didn't want to scare me off the road. It wanted to bring me somewhere. I couldn't bring myself to haul another load for a while after that. Parked my rig at a buddy's yard and took a few days off in a cheap motel just outside Oklahoma City. Figured maybe some sleep, a hot shower, and a few stiff drinks might clear my head. But deep down, I knew this wasn't something I could wash off. That night in the motel, I woke up at 3:11 a.m. Not because of a noise, because of the silence. There was no hum from the mini-fridge, no cars outside, no buzz from the ceiling light, just dead, suffocating quiet. I sat up, heart already thumping, and noticed the window curtains were gently moving. But the AC was off. No breeze outside, just moving like someone was breathing against them. I grabbed the remote, turned the TV on to break the silence, and every single channel was static, except one. Channel 66. It showed a live feed, black and white, grainy, like a security camera. I squinted at the screen and realized I was looking at the hallway outside my room. Could see my door, room 12. Empty hallway. But as I watched, something stepped into frame. Tall, thin, dressed in a stained long-haul driver's uniform, the EO, company patch torn clean off. It walked slow, like its joints didn't bend right. Then it stopped in front of my door. Didn't knock, just stood there. I held my breath, eyes glued to the screen. It raised a hand, pale and wrong, like wax stretched, over wire, and it touched the lens. The screen went black. And at that same second, I heard the doorknob jiggle. I didn't even breathe. I just stared at that knob, expecting it to turn, waiting for the door to creak open. But it didn't. Just silence. Then I noticed something even worse. My cell phone was on the nightstand, screen lit up, buzzing. Not from a call or a text. It was playing a voicemail. I hadn't even touched it. I leaned in and listened. The message was barely audible, all static and faint whispering, but I swear I heard my own voice say, "Why didn't you open the door?" I unplugged everything and got the hell out of there. Didn't even check out. Just grabbed my duffel, threw it in the cab, and took off. But the damage was done. Whatever I'd run into on that highway stretch wasn't just a ghost or a hallucination. It had marked me, and now it was following me off the road, into towns, into rooms, into dreams. Couple nights later, I stopped at a diner off Highway 61. The kind of greasy spoon that serves burgers so greasy the paper melts. It was late, about 2 a.m. I sat at the counter, ordering coffee just to keep my hands busy, when the waitress, a tired-looking lady with cigarette voice, leans over and says, "You're the guy they're watching, ain't you?" I froze. "What?" I asked, heart spiking. She didn't look surprised, just nodded, like she'd been expecting me. "The road knows your name now," she said, pouring my coffee. "You keep driving. You're gonna find the place it's leading you to." I asked her what she meant, who they were, but she just smiled, a sad little thing, and said, "Ain't my story to tell, sugar. But when you get to the bridge with no name, don't stop. Don't look down. And for the love of God, don't listen if they call your name." I left a 20 on the counter and walked out of there like the building was burning. I didn't even finish my coffee. And wouldn't you know it, when I climbed back into my cab, the logbook was waiting on the passenger seat again. This time, the word "soon" was written under my name. Real neat. Real final. I tried tossing it out the window as I pulled back on the road, but it never hit the ground. Just vanished into the dark. Gone. That's when I started seeing headlights behind me. No matter where I drove, even through empty stretches of backcountry road, there they were. Too far back to make out the vehicle, but always there. I'd pull off for gas. Gone. Pull back on. Right behind me again. Not tailgating. Just following. Patient, persistent. And then one night, I finally saw where the road was taking me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't just being followed anymore. I was being led, like the road had turned into something smarter than me, something alive. I kept driving, barely sleeping, drinking truck stop coffee like it was oxygen. The next few days, I started seeing signs again. Not the usual kind. No towns, no speed limits, no mile markers. These were hand-painted on old wood, nailed into trees or stuck in the dirt like graves. One of them said, "No. Deliveries beyond this point." Another said, "Last fuel for the living." And my favorite, "Hope you didn't bring a mirror." That one chilled me straight through. I came across a town that wasn't supposed to exist. It wasn't on the map, didn't show up on GPS, and it wasn't even on the CB chatter, which is rare. Drivers talk about everything. It was called Greymouth. The sign was rusted, tilted, Looked like it had been there 100 years. I needed diesel and food, so I figured I'd roll in, grab what I needed, and roll right out. But the second I crossed into that place, I knew I'd made a mistake. The streets were too clean. No people, no pets, not even birds in the sky. Buildings looked maintained but unused, like a movie set. No broken windows, but no light either. I pulled into what looked like an old-timey gas station, the kind with analog pumps and a bell that dings when you drive over the hose. The bell did ding, but no one came out. I stepped inside the station, hoping to find a cashier. There was a man behind the counter, but he wasn't moving, just sitting there, staring at me with eyes that didn't blink. I said, "Hey, you work here?" Nothing, just kept staring. His mouth started to move, slow and deliberate. No sound came out, just a wide, slow-motion whisper, like his voice had been stolen. I leaned in closer, and that's when he lunged. Fast, too fast, grabbing the counter like he was trying to pull himself over it. I fell back, heart slamming, and the second my boots hit the tile, the lights flickered, and he was gone. Just gone. I looked up. Counter empty. No sign of him. I ran outside, and now the town looked different. Windows were cracked, street lamps flickered. I looked over at my rig and saw handprints, dozens of them, all over the cab. Greasy black smears like someone had been climbing it. I climbed, in fast, locked the doors, and peeled out of there like the devil was in the passenger seat. My mirrors showed the town behind me, and then nothing. Just trees again, no Greymouth, no sign, like it vanished as soon as I left. I told myself I imagined it, just exhaustion, stress, maybe even something in the coffee. But that night, when I stopped to sleep near a way station in Idaho, I saw something that made my skin turn to ice. I woke up just before sunrise and stepped outside to stretch. Looked over at the trailer and saw words scratched deep into the metal, all along the side, like claws or a knife had done it. It said, "You passed the gate, no coming back." Below that, one line burned into the paint. "Tell them." I don't know who them is. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's the other drivers out there who think ghosts and demons only show up in books. But I know now this highway. It's got layers. Places that weren't built by people. Routes you don't find on maps. Cross the wrong one, and it don't matter how good a driver you are. You've already gone too far. And brother, the road remembers. I kept driving, hoping I could outrun whatever I'd crossed into, but deep down I knew it wasn't that. Simple. You don't walk through a haunted town that disappears behind you like smoke and expect life to go back to normal. I started noticing little things changing, like time slipping. I'd leave a rest stop at 2:15 in the morning and arrive at my next checkpoint at 2:11, fuel gauges reading full even when I hadn't topped off. My reflection in the side mirror? Sometimes it didn't move when I did. I'd glance over and it'd still be looking straight ahead even when I turned my head. It smiled once. I didn't. I quit checking mirrors after that. It was around Wyoming when I picked up a hitchhiker. I know. It's the dumbest thing a trucker can do, especially with everything going on. But this guy? He didn't feel normal. And I don't mean that in a creepy serial killer way. I mean he didn't feel real. He was standing on the shoulder at dusk, right at the base of a long incline near an abandoned rest area. Had a duffel bag and a sign that just said, "To nowhere." Normally I'd drive right past, but my hands turned the wheel before my brain could stop him. Pulled over. He climbed in like he'd been expecting me. Tall, lean fella, bald. Eyes too dark to catch the light. Didn't say a word at first, just nodded at me and set his bag between us. I asked where he was headed. He said, "Wherever the road forgets its name." That hit me like a gut punch. I said, "You mean that bridge? The stone one?" He just smiled and said, "You've seen it too then. You passed the first test." I didn't know what to say to that. So we drove in silence for a long while, maybe an hour, maybe 5. I couldn't tell anymore. He eventually spoke again, real quiet. Said, "There are places the road tries to bury, places it hides from the map, but if you drive long enough, you'll find 'em, or they'll find you." I asked him what was happening to me. "Why me? Why now?" He said, "The road's alive. It feeds on stories, on fear. When you crossed the bridge, you gave it what it needed. Now it won't let go." I looked at him and said, "Then what the hell am I supposed to do?" He leaned in, whispered, "Keep driving, keep talking. As long as you tell the story, you ain't part of the pavement yet." He reached for his bag and pulled out something I'll never forget. An old trucker's logbook, leather-bound, weather-worn, just like mine. Inside, the pages were filled with entries in different handwriting, stories like mine, highways that looped in circles, towns where the dead shopped for groceries, black-eyed kids thumbing rides in the fog, names of drivers I'd heard about. Years ago, guys who vanished without a trace. He turned to the last page, handed me a pen and said, "Your turn." I stared at that empty space, hand shaking, heart pounding. I wrote down my name, and the moment I did, the truck lurched. Not like a bump in the road, but like it had decided to go somewhere new. He said, "Good. Now they know you belong." I looked over, and he was gone. No duffel, no sound, no door slam. Just vanished like a shadow in headlights. I slammed the brakes, hot in my throat. Jumped out, checked the side of the road, the sleeper cab, everywhere. Nothing. But the logbook was still on the passenger seat, and it was warm. I flipped back through the pages, and now some of the names. They were scratched out, not crossed off, scratched out, like clawed through with desperation. Mine was still clean, but next to it, a new word had been added in blood-red ink. Witness. That night, I parked in the middle of nowhere and watched the stars. They didn't look right. There were constellations I didn't recognize. The moon was too quiet. And the CB, it started picking up static again. Voices, truckers crying, screaming, begging. One voice came through clear as day, sounded just like the hitchhiker. He said, "Keep driving, Jake. They're waiting." I never told him my name. The next few days were like driving through someone else's dream, more like a nightmare, really. Roads I'd driven 100 times suddenly felt unfamiliar. Mile markers were either repeating or missing altogether. My GPS stopped working. Entirely. Just showed a black screen with a single word flashing on it. Listen. That's it. Just listen. I tried rebooting the whole damn system, unplugged the power. Nothing helped. Eventually, I just shut it off. Didn't want to stare at that word anymore. I figured I'd follow the sun and keep on moving. I was running low on fuel and my nerves were frayed like a split wire. That's when I saw another sign. Not a Highway 1. This was hand-carved again, nailed to a rotted post stuck in the dirt beside the road. Exit now to forget. I passed it, of course. I ain't the kind of guy to follow cryptic signs into places that don't show up on a map. Not after Greymouth. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe the road wanted me to pass it. 'Cause right after I did, everything got real strange. The sky went from daylight to full night in less than 30 seconds. I'm not kidding. 1 second the sun was overhead. The next thing I know, I'm flipping on my headlights, squinting into pitch black like I'd just driven into a cave. And that's when I noticed my headlights weren't reflecting off anything. No road. Signs. No lines on the asphalt. Just endless black. And worse, there was no sound. My engine was humming. I could see the RPMs, but I couldn't hear it. Not a single vibration, not a breath of noise, like the whole world had gone deaf. I tapped the brakes and eased to a stop. Got out, flashlight in hand, and stepped onto, the pavement. The second my boots hit the ground, I heard something. A whisper, right behind me. Spun around. Nothing. Just the road, and the dark. I shined the light back toward the cab and nearly dropped it. My rig wasn't there. I mean, it was gone, like I never drove it. I was standing on empty road in the middle of nowhere, no taillights, no trailer, not even tire tracks. I ran. Up and down the stretch of road, shouting my own name like a man possessed. And then I saw it, about 50 yards behind me. My truck, parked sideways across the road like it had been thrown there. I don't know how I got ahead of it, but I sure as hell didn't remember passing it. I ran back, climbed in, turned the key, and she roared to life like nothing happened. But when I checked the dashboard, the odometer was spinning backward. I kid you not, clocking off miles like I was undriving my entire career. I punched the wheel, yelled into the dark, and just started driving again. 'Cause what the hell else was I gonna do? After a while, the sky lightened up like nothing ever happened. Just dawn rising over empty highway. I stopped at a diner outside of Flagstaff, one I'd been to before. Place always had good coffee and a mean meatloaf sandwich. I walked in and recognized the waitress, Lucy, an older gal with a crooked smile and a thick Texas drawl. Only she looked scared when she saw me, dropped the coffee pot right there on the tile. I said, "Hey, Lucy, it's just me. You all right?" She backed up against the counter and whispered, "We buried you last year." My blood turned to ice. I laughed, nervous-like, and said, "You must be thinking of someone else." She just shook her head, eyes wide. "You don't understand," she said. "You came in here last June. You were white as a sheet. You told us not to follow the bow. Highway East, said it was hollow. Then you dropped dead right there in that booth." She pointed at it. "Booth number 7, my favorite. And when I turned to look, I saw my logbook sitting on the table. Same leather cover, same red ink, open to a blank page. I didn't remember leaving it there. I didn't remember writing the words that were now scrawled across the top. You're not done." I didn't touch the logbook, not right away. Just staring at it made my skin crawl like ants were marching up my spine. I asked Lucy who'd buried me, and she said it was a closed casket funeral. "Wasn't much left of you," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Truck was found burnt out on a stretch of highway that doesn't even show up on satellite. State troopers said it must have been a gas fire, but there wasn't enough left to identify. Just the book, that logbook." I walked over to the booth, real slow, and sat down. The second my ass hit the seat, the whole diner went silent. All the chatter, the kitchen noise, even the hum of the overhead lights, it all just stopped. I looked down at the logbook. The blank page I'd seen, it wasn't blank anymore. It was writing itself. I watched letters form in that red ink, scratching across the page like an invisible hand was dragging a pen across it. It said, "Stop looking back. Keep the story moving. They're listening." I slammed the thing shut and stood up so fast I knocked over the sugar jar. Didn't care. I was done with that place. I ran outside, but my rig was gone again. Only this time, there were 2 sets of tire tracks leading away from the lot. One going west, one going east. I didn't know which one to follow. Hell, I didn't even know how I'd gotten there. Then I heard it, the rumble of my engine, but it wasn't coming from the lot. It was coming from below. I looked down and saw the manhole cover at my feet vibrating like something was under. The road. I dropped to my knees and put my ear to it, and I swear on all that's holy, I heard my own voice. Screaming, begging, pleading. It was saying, "Don't go east, don't go east." I backed away, breathing hard, heart pounding. But that's when I noticed the road signs had changed. Instead of Route 66, the green metal sign said, Route 0, no arrow. No direction, just a warning. Travel at your own risk. I didn't care anymore. I just needed to get back in the damn truck and get moving, whichever way I could. And as soon as I thought that, there she was, my rig, appearing around. The corner like she'd just come back from a walk. Headlights on, engine humming, trailer in perfect shape. I climbed in, trying not to think too hard about what just happened. I pulled out of the lot, took the western path. Something Deep in my gut told me that was the lesser evil. For a while, everything felt normal again. Just me and the open road. A sunrise stretching across the sky, country music on low, wind in my beard. But that peace didn't last long. I passed a sign that said, "Welcome to Redemption, Pop." The question marks weren't paint. Someone had scratched out the number. The whole town looked abandoned, buildings sagging, trees growing up through cracks in the sidewalks. But what caught my attention was the truck. Another rig, same model as mine, same color, even the same decals on the doors, parked right there in front of a burned-out grocery store. I stepped out to check it out, feeling like I was looking at my own ghost. When I got to the cab, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Inside, slumped over the wheel, was me, or someone who looked exactly like me, burnt to a crisp, skin blackened and curled, jaw hanging open in a permanent scream, and clutched in that corpse's hand, the same leather logbook. I backed away, hands shaking. I didn't know if I was alive, dead, a ghost, or trapped in some sick version of purgatory where the road writes your fate. But I knew one thing. Whoever, whatever was watching me wanted the story told. And if telling it was the only thing keeping me alive, then I was going to tell every damn mile of it. Days blurred together after that. I kept driving through stretches of highway that weren't on any map, towns that vanished when I looked away, and skies that shifted color like mood rings. The logbook was always with me now, never leaving. My side like a cursed companion. Every night when I parked somewhere safe, if there even was such a thing, I'd write down everything I'd seen, everything that had happened, like I was trying to keep myself tethered to reality. Some nights, the ink would dry as normal. Other nights, the words would bleed and swirl into shapes I couldn't understand, like the book had its own will. One night, I stopped at a rundown truck stop just outside a place called Black Hollow. The neon sign flickered overhead, buzzing like an old horror movie. I was just getting out to stretch when I heard voices from the shadows. Not the usual, trucker chatter. These voices were low, chanting in a language I didn't recognize. I followed the sound to a circle of hooded figures standing around a fire pit that glowed with unnatural green flames. I froze, hiding behind a fuel tanker. They spoke of the highway as if it were a living god, called it the endless vein, the source of their power and curse, said it fed on the souls of drivers like me, dragging us into its eternal road trip through hell. One of them noticed me, lifted their hood. Their face was pale, eyes empty pits of black, mouth stretched in a silent scream. I didn't stick around to say hello. I bolted back to my truck, slamming the door behind me and punching the ignition like my life depended on it because it did. I floored it out of that place and didn't look back. The radio burst to life with static and a voice whispering, "You belong to the road now, Jake." I gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I realized this wasn't just a ghost story or a bad trip. This was a war, a fight to keep my soul from being swallowed by the highway itself. And every mile I drove, every story I told was my weapon. So here I am, still driving, still talking, hoping you're listening. Because if you're hearing this, maybe it means I'm still holding on. But the road, it's never done with me. Not yet. All right, so I'm still out here on this never-ending stretch of cursed highway, and let me tell you, the weirdness just keeps piling up like a bad traffic jam. After that night in Black Hollow, I figured I'd seen it all, or at least I hoped so. But the road had other plans. One late evening, I pulled into this rest stop that looked completely normal at first glance. Bright lights, clean bathrooms, a couple of semi-trucks parked on either side. I thought finally a break. But as soon as I stepped out of my cab, the air got heavy, like someone had locked the whole place in a freezer and left the door open. I reached for my coffee thermos, but the lid was frozen shut, and my breath was puffing out in thick clouds, even though it wasn't cold enough for that. Then I saw it, a little girl standing by the vending machines. She was just there, staring right at me with these huge, dark eyes that seemed way too old for a kid her age. When I called out to her, she didn't blink or even flinch, just smiled. That eerie smile, the kind that sends a chill right down your spine. I asked her if she was lost, and she said, "I'm waiting for my daddy to come home." That's when I realized there was no parent around, no other people at all. Just her and the humming vending machines. Suddenly the lights flickered, and the girl vanished. Just like that. I rubbed my eyes, but when I looked again, she was gone. I climbed back into the cab, shakier than I wanted to admit. The CB crackled with static, and then a whisper. "She's waiting for you now, Jake." My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. I punched the accelerator and blasted out of that rest stop faster than I ever have. The image of those dark eyes burned into my mind. From then on, every time I stopped at a rest area or truck stop, I kept seeing little shadows flicker just beyond the edge of my vision. Sometimes I swear I heard a kid's laughter echoing just as I was about to doze off. And the logbook, it kept growing. New pages would appear overnight, filled with warnings, stories from other drivers who didn't make it, and sometimes just cryptic phrases like, "Don't trust the night," or "The road remembers your fear." One night, as I was trucking through the desert, I caught sight of a hitchhiker on the side of the road. Same deal as before, a bald man with those hollow eyes, holding a sign that just said, "Home." This time I didn't stop. I was too scared to. But the image stuck with me, haunting every mile. I don't know what these figures are. Ghosts, spirits, something worse. But I do know they're all connected to this cursed highway. And every driver who's ever been caught by it ends up as a part of the story, just like me. So here I am, still driving, still talking, still fighting. The shadows. Because maybe, just maybe, if I keep telling this story loud enough, the road'll have to let me go. And if you're listening, remember this. Sometimes the scariest thing isn't what's out there on the highway, it's what's inside your own head when you're all alone in the dark. After that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, not just by those ghostly figures, but by something far older, something that had been lurking along this highway long before me or any of the other drivers. On one particular stretch, miles from anything familiar, I came across an old roadside chapel. It looked abandoned, the paint peeling and windows boarded up, but there was a strange pull, like it was calling me. Against my better judgment, I parked the truck and stepped inside. The air was thick with the scent of damp wood and something metallic, like old blood. The pews were broken, scattered across the floor, but at the altar stood a figure cloaked in shadow. I couldn't make out its face, but I felt its eyes burning into mine. Then it spoke, voice like gravel sliding down a steel pipe. "You carry their stories, but the highway wants more. It feeds on fear, on memories, on the souls of those who wander too far." My hands trembled as I fumbled with my logbook. The pages fluttered open to a passage I didn't remember writing. "Beware the price of silence. Speak, or become part of the night." The figure reached out a hand, and suddenly I was pulled into darkness, the sound of my heartbeat loud enough to drown out everything else. When I came to, I was back in my truck, the engine humming as if nothing had happened. But outside, the world had changed. The sky was no longer blue. It was a swirling mass of black clouds, and the highway stretched endlessly into a void. The radio crackled with static before a single word echoed through the speakers. "Run!" I slammed the pedal to the metal, the rig's tires screeching as I tried to escape the black horizon. But no matter how fast I drove, the darkness followed, creeping closer with every mile. That's when I realized the truth. This highway was a trap, a purgatory where lost souls were condemned to drive forever. The only way out was to keep telling the story, to pass on the terror and the warning so others might avoid the same fate. So I'm here, still trucking, still telling you everything I see, hoping my words can keep the darkness at bay. Because if I stop, if I go silent, I'll be just another ghost, lost on the highway, driving forever in the night. One night, as I was rolling down a stretch of highway that twisted like a serpent under a thick fog, I felt the cab get colder than ice. The heater was cranked up, but the chill crept in through the seams of the doors and windows. I glanced in, the rearview mirror, and caught sight of a figure standing in the fog behind my trailer. A woman in a white dress, her hair long and tangled, face pale and eyes hollow. I blinked, and she was gone. My heart started pounding, and the radio, which had been dead static all day, suddenly crackled with a faint voice whispering, "Don't look back." I fought the urge but glanced behind again, and this time the road was empty. Just fog. But that whisper stayed with me, seeping into my bones. I pressed on, but every mile felt heavier, like the weight of unseen eyes was pressing down on my shoulders. As I neared an old bridge that locals called Devil's Crossing, my headlights flickered and died, plunging me into darkness. The truck stalled. I tried everything to restart her, but nothing worked. That's when I heard footsteps outside. Slow, deliberate, coming closer. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out, the fog swirling thick around me. There she was again, the woman, staring at me with that mournful, empty gaze. She raised a hand and pointed toward the bridge. "Help me," she said, voice like the wind through dead leaves. Against every instinct screaming at me, I stepped onto the bridge. The wood groaned under my boots, and the fog seemed to swallow the world whole. Halfway across, I saw shapes in the water below, faces twisted in agony, hands reaching up as if begging for rescue. The woman vanished, and suddenly the bridge shook violently, like the earth itself was angry. I sprinted back to the truck and managed to start it, just as the bridge collapsed behind me, swallowed by the mist. I never did find out who that woman was or what she wanted, but from then on, I knew this highway wasn't just a road. It was a gateway to grief, to sorrow, to endless stories of lost souls. And as long as I keep driving, keep telling these stories, maybe I can keep her and the others from being forgotten. Because out here on the highway, sometimes the past is just as alive and just as scary as what's coming next. That night on Devil's Crossing stayed with me longer than I'd like to admit. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those faces in the water, silent and desperate, and the woman's pleading eyes burning into my soul. But the highway had a way of pulling me back in, like a siren's call I couldn't resist. A few days later, I found myself cruising through a stretch of road locals called the Hollow. It was a narrow canyon, cliffs towering on both sides, and the sky always seemed darker there, like the sun was afraid to shine. The radio buzzed with static until a song came through, old country, the kind that makes you feel like you're sitting on a porch with a bottle of whiskey and no worries. Only this time, the song was off. The lyrics whispered warnings, tales of drivers who disappeared without a trace, their trucks found abandoned with no sign of the driver. I felt a chill run down my spine and looked over to see a figure standing. At the edge of the road, a man in an old-fashioned trucker cap, waving me down. I hesitated but pulled over. The man climbed in, his eyes cold and hollow, his smile thin and sharp. He told me stories, horror stories, about the highway, about how it fed on loneliness and fear, how it trapped drivers in a loop of endless miles, never letting them rest, never letting them go home. I tried to ask his name, but he just laughed, a sound like cracking ice, and said, "Names don't matter here, friend, only stories do." When I looked back, he was gone, vanished without a trace. The radio went dead, the music faded, and I was alone again, miles from anywhere, with the sun sinking below the horizon. That night, as I drove through the hollow, I realized the highway wasn't just haunted by ghosts. It was alive, watching, waiting, and it knew my story. It wanted me to keep telling it, to keep driving, because as long as I did, I wasn't lost. Yet. But I was running out of road. And maybe, just maybe, the highway was running out of time too. I kept driving through the hollow, my eyes glued to the cracked windshield as the canyon walls closed in tighter and tighter. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky blood red, and a heavy silence settled over the rig like a thick blanket. No birds, no insects, just the low hum of the engine and the distant eerie echo of something breathing. My radio, dead for most of the day, suddenly burst to life with static that crackled and popped before a voice came through, soft, almost pleading. "Jake, don't stop." It was the same voice I'd heard before, but this time it sounded desperate, like a warning or a cry for help. My hands tightened on the wheel. I didn't want to stop. Hell, I didn't want to slow down either. But the rig began to shudder, the engine coughing like it was choking on the road itself. Then, out of nowhere, the headlights flickered, and the entire canyon plunged into darkness. I slammed on the brakes, heart pounding, and looked around in the pitch-black cab. The only light was a faint glow coming from my logbook on the dashboard. I grabbed it, flipping through pages that weren't there before. Pages filled with names, dates, and chilling messages like, "Don't look behind. The road takes what's owed, and keep moving or be consumed." Suddenly the cab window fogged up, and a handprint appeared, slow and deliberate, pressed against the glass. I stared, frozen. The handprint started to smear, revealing a pale face with hollow eyes staring right at me. I slammed the window shut and hit the ignition again. The engine roared to life, and the lights flickered back on. I didn't stop driving until the sun was up, and the hollow was behind me. But I knew deep down the highway was still watching, still waiting for me to slip up, to slow down, to get lost in its endless nightmare. And every night, as I drive through the dark, I wonder, how many more drivers have been swallowed whole by this cursed road? How many stories will I carry before my own becomes just another warning written in blood and fear? But for now, I'm still here, still driving, still telling you everything, hoping my voice is loud enough to keep the darkness at bay. Because out here, on the highway, silence is the first step toward being lost forever. The nights kept getting darker, and the A road felt longer than ever. I remember one stretch out near the border of nowhere, a place they called Dead Man's Curve, a bend so sharp and steep that trucks had been known to crash there for decades. But that night, it wasn't just the curve I had to watch out for. As I approached, the headlights caught something in the distance, a figure standing right on the edge of the asphalt, motionless, staring at me with eyes that burned like coals. It was a man, or at least what looked like one, wearing a tattered leather jacket and a trucker hat pulled low over his face. I slowed down, heart hammering, because you never know if someone's hitching or if it's something else altogether. But when I stopped, the man didn't move. I called out, "Hey, you okay?" No response. I stepped out, the cold night air biting at my skin. That's when I noticed his hands. They weren't hands at all, but clawed, twisted things that scraped the pavement with a sound like nails on a chalkboard. I took a step back, and that's when I saw the truck behind him, or rather, the ghost of a truck, flaming wheels, a cracked windshield, and inside, the driver's eyes staring out, wild and empty. The man turned slowly, and his face was nothing but a skull, grinning wide enough to split his head in two. I jumped back into my cab, slamming the door shut, as the ghost truck roared to life behind me. The roar was deafening, and I felt the air shift as if something was chasing me, not just on the road, but in my soul. I punched the accelerator and tore through Dead Man's Curve, the ghostly roar echoing in my ears long after I'd left that cursed spot behind. Since that night, I've never dared slow down on curves or look too long in the rear view. Because sometimes, the highway doesn't just want your soul. It wants your fear, your sanity, your very life. But I'm still here, still driving, still telling the story, so you'll know what waits in the shadows of the road. The highway's alive, and it remembers every one of us who's ever dared to cross it. And if you ever find yourself alone on a dark curve, remember, don't stop. Don't look back. Just drive. I can still feel it sometimes. The highway's cold breath on the back of my neck. The way the shadows stretch out longer than they should, twisting and writhing like they're alive. After all these years and miles, after all the ghostly faces and eerie whispers, I've come to understand something. This road isn't just asphalt and gravel. It's a living nightmare, a place where the past, present, and future collide, trapping souls like mine in an endless loop. But maybe that's the real horror, that no matter how far you drive, no matter how fast you run, some things just follow you. I've shared these stories with you, not just to scare you, but to warn you. Because the highway listens. It feeds on your fear, your loneliness, your secrets. And if you don't tell your story, if you try to keep it all inside, the highway will make sure your silence becomes part of its dark history. So here I am, still behind the wheel, still driving through the night, still telling you everything I've seen and felt. Because on this highway, the scariest thing isn't what's waiting in the shadows. It's the silence you leave behind. Thanks for riding with me. Stay safe out there.